So, what is narrative writing? Let's give some tips and examples today. Hi, welcome to First Editing. I'm Joellen, and today we'll be talking about narrative writing. We'll dive into what it is, which narrative structures you can follow, and the four major types of narrative writing. So, what is narrative writing? Well, narrative writing is essentially storytelling. And unlike descriptive writing or persuasive writing, narrative writing is all about the plot and your character's development. Basically, any fictional story falls under this umbrella, so that would be a narrative. And generally, there are certain rules that constitute not narrative writing, such as the fact that your story should follow basic narrative structure. So, before we unpack everything there is to know about structures, let's mention the three basic characteristics of narrative writing. First, your story always needs a protagonist, and this is someone your readers will root for and they create an emotional connection to. Your protagonist should always have a specific flaw at the beginning of the story, and this flaw should be resolved by the end of your story. For example, your character might be afraid to open up and connect and should to show any vulnerability. So which is why they struggle throughout the plot only to finally make a friend at the end of your book. Secondly, your plot should be the major driving point behind the narrative. If nothing happens, the story will not be interesting. And thirdly, your plot should exist within the overarching frame of a narrative structure. So, all right, what is a narrative structure? Well, it is essentially a template for what should happen and when throughout the story. There are many different structures out there, but some of the most common ones are the hero's journey, the three-act structure, and the eight-sequence structure. Now, the hero's journey, or what's also referred to as Campbell's monomyth, it maps the linear progress of a character's epic story. It includes specific plot points like the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, and the appearance of a mentor who is the guide for the character and takes them where they need to go. So let's look at Harry Potter as an example. When Harry receives his letter to Hogwarts, he's being called to his adventure, so he is the hero. And the first few chapters are all about the obstacles that lie between Harry and his train journey to Hogwarts, which includes Harry's own doubts and later has Hagrid appear as his mentor who helps him enter into this magical world. Next, we have the three-act structure, which is a typical structure of theater plays that can be easily applied to novels as well. Act 1 usually includes the beginning, an inciting incident, and the decision to embark on a journey. Act 2 revolves around different obstacles, as well as the midpoint, which can be described as false victory or false defeat because the character thinks they've reached the end only for them to discover that there's more to come. And Act 3 is where the story reaches its peak. It comprises pre-climax, climax, and the descending action and resolution. Finally, the eight-sequence structure is inspired by screenwriting techniques. So years ago, feature-length movies in cinemas had to be broken down into 8 parts because of the changing of the tape, which meant that screenwriters had to keep the audience excited for the next 15-minute sequence. And this means the narrative can be split into 8 chunks, each of which is a mini story of its own. 1, status quo. The character and their world are introduced. 2, instant. The character receives a call to action. 3, it's the turning point. The characters is accepted the call to action and they face the first challenge. Then comes the midpoint where the protagonist is changed as a result of that first challenge. Next, we have different obstacles where the character keeps developing over the manuscript. Then comes the crisis, and this is where things have gotten worse and everything seems to be going completely wrong. The story peaks with the climax, and it often includes a big battle or a dramatic revelation. And finally, the aftermath of the climax is in the resolution. So as you can see, narrative structures are just different ways of breaking down the same plot points, and it's completely up to you to choose which one you'd like to follow. So let's talk about the 4 major types of narrative writing. The first thing we need to understand is that the way we tell stories might be different from how the stories actually happen. So, for example, many writers start writing in media res, which means in the middle of things. And this technique gives you a lot of space for flashbacks as well as linear development. And linear writing is actually the first type of narrative writing. It's when events are told in a chronological order. On the other hand, nonlinear writing is when the order in which you tell your story, it's fragmented or it isn't chronological at all. So Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling is linear, but The Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk is fragmented and therefore nonlinear. Another way to look at narrative writing is to split it into a viewpoint narrative, which is when you write in the I form and focus on the emotional world of the protagonist, and a third person omniscient narrative, where the narrator is an independent character who can see into the characters' heads. And our final tip is to keep in mind that each high quality story actually contains an A story and a B story. So in her book, Save the Cat, writes the novel, Jessica Brody explains that while the A story is the premise and the plot of the book, the B story is the hidden message beneath. So, for example, the A story might be Harry's fight against Voldemort, but the B story is the power of love and friendship. Similarly, A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman is also about a broody senior man and his daily life, but the universal message underneath is about the value of human connection. And more often than not, it's exactly these universal messages that readers relate to the most. And that is everything for today. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions at all, drop them in the comment section below or write us an email at editors@firstediting.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.